Welcome, everyone. Very excited to have you all for our second Decoding Dementia gathering. My name is Charles de Vilmorin, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. I am beyond excited about the time we're going to spend together, what we're going to learn, the exchanges we're going to have. And in order to get started, I just want to briefly introduce Activity Strong, Link Senior, and what we're going to talk about today. So as a reminder, Activity Strong is a platform that Link Senior started in partnership with amazing organization, Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. As I mentioned, I am with a company called Link Senior. We have strong values that we're very proud of. One of them, some of you might know, is called Old People Are Cool. It's us not being fan of segregation based on age. We think that everybody is cool, including our elders. And obviously, the reason why we're here today is Activity Strong, which is a platform that started in early 2020 as a means to support and educate and empower what we think are essential part of senior living, essential part of society, actually. People that's job is to show up at work every day and provide meaningful, purposeful engagement for older adults. We're very proud of the work and accomplishment that we've achieved at Link Senior. We touched the lives of 50,000 older adults in the US and Canada. We're based in Washington, DC, and our work is evidence-based. If you have any questions on how we can empower your team, help you do more of what you love to do, which is to engage residents, please be in touch with us. As I mentioned, we are evidence-based. We did a clinical study with amazing quality of life, clinical, and financial outcome that was actually published in 2019. So that's a little bit of the background. In terms of housekeeping and just the details about today's sessions within us, because there are 3 sessions, we can earn up to 3 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and or NCCDP CU credits. To earn the credits, you need to attend the full session. So as you probably have seen from the agenda, there are 3 sessions, so you can earn up to 3 of them. To do that, please fill in the CU survey no later than midnight of this week so that we can process your certificate of attendance and again issue up to 3 of these particular certificates. Please note that due to the very high number of attendees, the certificates will be sent out by email throughout next week. So starting on Monday, ending on September 15th. And if you have any questions, please send them to expedite the response to webinars with an S, webinars@linksenior.com. As a reminder, the session is being recorded. So if you want to enjoy it in the future, if you think you have friends or colleague or anyone in your organization or beyond that might benefit from the lessons learned, please feel free to share the recordings. They will be listed in a couple of days on our website. I think that all of us are very familiar with Zoom at this point in time. So on Zoom, we have 2 features, the chat and the Q&A. Please use the chat as much as possible, which, as some of you might know, it gets super busy. If you want to have a question for a esteemed panelist, please make sure that you use the Q&A. That's the best way for us to bubble up that question to them and make sure that it gets addressed within the time of that session. If you want to chat with everyone, please make sure you select everyone in the drop-down so that everyone can benefit from your contribution. Lastly, please have fun. A lot of what we do is about obviously learning, is about promoting a better world for elders, especially the ones that live with a cognitive change, but also important to us and them is that we continue to have fun every day. And last but not least, and that includes our panelists, I want to thank you all for what you do every single day. As I mentioned, that arm of senior living, the engagement arm, is essential. And so I just want to remind us, we just want to remind that, and thank you all for what you do every single day. In terms of introduction, I can't tell you how excited we've been working for now a month on that particular session. The there's a lot to be said about the quality and the experience, but I'll probably just say, the title of the session, because that's probably the best way to introduce it, which is that right now we are going to learn from pioneers. So people who actually started or really contributed to the very beginning and still are super active, obviously, today, learning from the pioneers of person-directed living. And we can think of anyone better to start that conversation and orchestrate it. I'm very pleased to introduce you all to Rita Altman, who's the memory care advisor, Sunrise Senior Living, a dementia care consultant. Rita, take it away. Thank you all for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles, for giving everyone the opportunity to be on this platform to learn, and to the esteemed panelists throughout the day. Wonderful. Welcome. And I just know that there's no doubt that all of you already have heard about validation, the best friends approach, and Cameron Camp's Montessori Inspired Lifestyle approaches. So today we are going to learn from Dr. Camp, Vicki de Klerk, and David Troxel as they share the key principles of their ways to improve not only the lives of older adults living with cognitive change or dementia, but also the lives of their care partners, their loved ones, their family members. It's, as we all know, it's not one person, it's the entire surrounding support network, and especially the families. So you are going to learn a lot, you're going to hear a lot, and with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over, starting with Cameron Camp, to do a brief intro, and then we'll get into some Q&A. Dr. Camp.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rita. First, I'd like to say thank you again to Charles. It is critically important for the work of life enrichment activity staff that their work and the outcomes produced be recognized and tied to data. And so this is a platform that enables that to happen. If you can't do that, you're a nice person who can be ignored. And so this is about a way to ensure that the importance of engagement of residents is first and foremost in the minds of people who write checks. Just saying. I'd also like to emphasize that the reason that David and Vicki and I are here together is that we want to send out a message that person-centered care is the central key element in humanizing care of persons with dementia and without. And that it isn't an either-or thing. You don't have to take sides with this. We always say, use everything that works, get as many tools for the tool belt as possible. David has given me resources to share on like 100 different things you can do in under 60 seconds to engage people. I've bumped into Naomi File many times when I was at Menora Park, and have used many of her techniques, especially with persons with advanced dementia, because it's what works and it's incredibly effective. So that's a message we want to send out there also. So our work is on has been focused on Montessori methods. We emphasize a rehabilitation approach, and we emphasize this across all levels of dementia, as well as for persons without dementia. So we emphasize a little bit more, I think, on the learning and rehab side of things. But I can tell you, if you go into a room and a person is incredibly angry and hard to understand, take out this before you go, read it. Also, in terms of relationship building, take this book out and read it. So this is important stuff. We are a united front in trying to help persons with dementia. Our work recently is looking at building communities, not only among persons with dementia, but also among staff. All of these approaches improve staff satisfaction. When staff members feel more competent and are able to be effective, it will improve their morale. You'll see a decrease in staff turnover and call-offs. That's important. We also directly emphasize engaging staff and using some of the same techniques for staff as we do with engaging residents. We have a staff engagement survey that's based on our 12 Montessori principles. So that's something we've pushed a little harder more recently. But once again, these are all person-centered. These are all effective. These are all useful. These are all research-based. And I encourage you to learn as much as possible. So that's a little overview on my side. And Rita, I'll let you choose the next person to chat.
How about we go with Vicki de Klerk-Rubin? Vicki.
Hi. Well, for those of you who've never heard of the validation method, it was developed by my mom, Naomi Feil, back in the 1960s and 70s. And at that point, she was really focused on the caregiver, whether it be a formal caregiver or a family member or, well, anybody who comes into contact, to put their own feelings aside for 5 minutes and focus on the needs and the emotions of the other person, of the person who has some form of cognitive decline. And she at that time was working with what then was called severely demented. We hate that word. But at any rate, what she discovered were some of the principles of validation, and that is there is almost always a reason behind the behavior, and those reasons are connected to needs and feelings, and that if we can meet the person using empathy, using exploring, whether it be verbally or non-verbally, just to give the person room and space to express what's there, what's in their heads, what's in their hearts, and not to judge it, and just to be there as a loving person. And that's the validation method. It's really a way of communicating with people, and specifically with older adults who have cognitive decline. So
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Great intro. David, on to you for your intro.
Well, thank you, Rita, and I'm honored to be here with you, Vicki, and Cameron as well. Again, I'm David Troxel. I've worked in the field of dementia care since 1986, began my career at the University of Kentucky when it was just one of 10 federally funded Alzheimer's research centers, with my dear friend and colleague, Virginia Bell, who many of you may know just recently passed away at almost 101. Together, we began our career at the university, but also started one of the first adult day centers in the country, an early Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Center. And that's really, that old book, Everything I Learned when I was, in kindergarten kind of thing, but everything I learned, I think I learned in day center to begin. And the power of relationships, activities, engagement, all of that was very strong. Since then, I've worked in Alzheimer's Association settings, community settings, nonprofits. I work as a consultant and writer and teacher these days. I guess what I'll say, simply put, is that the Best Friends philosophy, I think, was very much kind of a fellow traveler with Cameron's work and Vicki's work, Naomi. This idea of, treating each person as an individual, focusing on strengths, focusing on respect, authenticity. What I believe in our philosophy is that what a person with dementia needs in many ways is a friend, a best friend, and the qualities of friendship are empathy, communication, affection, doing things together, understanding, patience when things aren't always going so well. And so this Best Friends philosophy, we're thrilled, has been used around the world, and it's kind of a way for many professional and family members to kind of recast their relationships. So been honored to be part of this great movement. Writer, I have a new book coming out in fall about staff training and development. and delighted to be part of this panel today.
Wonderful. All right, you've all three already given us a little snippet or two about what you do, what your approach is. Can you hone in or zero in a little bit more specifically on the core principles, maybe one or two additional, if you've already mentioned one or two, core principles and values, and really how that truly benefits the older adult? And how about we start with you, David, again?
A couple of things that are, I think, very much understood these days after years of our movement to understand what quality dementia care is. But I guess I'd kind of start with two things. One is that there really isn't an effective medical treatment for Alzheimer's disease and the other dementias. Even with these new medications, we have a long way to go. So I like to say that the treatment for Alzheimer's and dementia is really you and me. It's about relationships, engagements. It's about creating a therapeutic healing environment. So a couple of very specific things I'd lift up. One is life story work. I still will sometimes go to a assisted living community and someone will say, well, George is having this challenge. I'll say, well, let's pull out his life story, take a look at it. We open the binder and it's missing or incomplete. I just want to encourage everybody here, and we even have I'll tease up an activity we'll do later in the day, but it's important to make sure your life story history is robust, that the staff know how to use it. And so I can come in and greet Cameron in the morning. Cameron, here's your coffee, 2 sugars and 2 creams, or maybe talk about Vicki's life in Germany and then, make sure she has her favorite pastries. Knowing certain things about people can make a huge difference. So I'd say double down on life story work is very, very important. And we'll talk a lot about it during the day, but I think also boredom is the enemy. I think activity, socialization, and making them, giving them some pizzazz and interest. I see the same activity calendars kind of everywhere I go. So I'd encourage everyone here, and I know all of you are very ambitious in your programming, to mix it up and have adult learning and borrow some things from Cameron's work about individualizing activities, and of course Vicki's work in validation and communication, knowing that even me just sitting and having a cup of tea with somebody and talking, right, Vicki, is almost as powerful an activity as any other kind of group activity.
Oh, awesome. Great reminders, because so often we all about those larger activities when the person is craving just someone's eye contact, someone's touch, or someone's ear. And to know that, and thank you for emphasizing life story, because you're so right. So sometimes they're great and we know so much, and sometimes we don't know enough until after they've passed and we read an obituary. So we want to know these things now. That this is the time. So everybody should take that back with them. How do your life stories look, and how can you make them even stronger? Thank you for those reminders. Cameron, can you share a couple more core principles of the Montessori lifestyle with us?
Sure. So the approach, as all of these person-centered approaches are based on the values of respect, dignity, equality, and trust. And so we say, what does a person with dementia want? And the answer is they want what a person without dementia wants. They want to feel like they're living in their home. They want to know their neighbors and for their neighbors to know them. They want to have a reason to wake up in the morning. They want to be part of a community, and they want to be connected to the outside world. So we're about creating resident-driven communities where residents have as much independence as possible, do as much for themselves as possible. We're a great believer in committees where like-minded residents decide on where they want to go for outings, how they want to greet new members of the community, what rituals will they have, how they will celebrate the life of someone who passes away, rather than having a body taken out at midnight through the back door. That's like being in a South American country where people are disappeared. That will not make you feel safe. And so it's about relationship. Once again, it is about learning new things as well. curiosity doesn't go away with age or with dementia, just the opportunity to experience that. And even if you can't remember the facts of a new idea or a story, the feelings that you have when you're in a place where you have variety and where original thinking is encouraged, that feeling becomes associated with that place, with the people around you, with the people who give you that opportunity. So it's about creating a sense of community and trust. And you use the tools for relationship building that all of us emphasize to help create that kind of a place. I can tell you that when a family member is touring a residence, and the tour is co-led by a resident with dementia who has learned this procedure with practice and who says, let me show you my home. Let me introduce you to members of the welcoming committee. That is a very different tour. And so another thing to emphasize is that this is like a good business model. These approaches are good business, and it's not an either or. It is the right thing to do, and I think it's what the market's going to increasingly demand. Certainly what I will. So just saying.
Wow. Okay. Great additional principles for all of us to keep in mind, and they all blend so beautifully and complement each other so well. Vicki, would you share a couple more key principles of validation or core values that you think everyone should know?
Absolutely, because it fits so perfectly into what David and Cameron has already said. The very first principle of validation is all people, oriented or not, are worthwhile and unique. So we have to treat each person as an individual. And even when they're expressing emotion, we have to give them space for that. The second principle, I'm reading from the book, actually, just to let you know. These people need to be accepted as they are, and we should not try to change them. And that may sound simple, but it's actually not. Accepting a person with all their anger or with all their sadness or not wanting to live anymore. Accepting them as they are, and as you said, just being there with them in their sadness, in their anger, is a gift. And it can be an activity. It is a way to be a friend. You know this from your own experience. When a really good friend has a hard thing, you just sit with them and you feel with them and you have empathy with them because you know you can't fix it. So I think those are key principles of validation that apply to all three methods and are a bridge among us. We all are coming from the same place. I love, Cameron, what you've been saying. I love, David, everything. I've written a lot of what you've said. And I wanted to say that life story work is critical.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if somebody I saw in the chat asked, where do I find this material? Well, I'm sure it's in David's books, but I can tell you we have a biography form that focuses somewhat on the facts of a person's life, but we also want to know what traumas have they encountered, what were their sticking points, because those are the things that often come back in late life.
We also have been developing a person-centered Montessori abilities system, which is designed to document the capabilities that people, especially with more advanced dementia, still have, and the minimal amount of assistance they need to succeed at different tasks. And that is combined with some personal history information, likes, dislikes, what they fear, as you were talking about, Vicki, so that you can take these measures of general ability, like, can they read out loud? Can they hold things? Can they match? And combine those with their personal background so you can create a truly person-centered plan of care. And as David and Vicki said, it's critical that this person's story be available in real time to the people who need it, that you have a system in place, whether it's index cards or a poster on the wall of their room that has photographs of things that are relevant to their life and their past, so that anyone can look at that and say, I see you like golf. To make it available and not buried in some place where you can document that it's there, but no one has access to it. Also, Vicki, two things that came to mind when you were talking. One is I've seen committees of residents who help transition new residents into memory care, who basically, it's like a support group for the transition from your own home into this place. And then also visitors committees of persons with more advanced dementia, where they take 30 minutes just to be in the room of someone who's ill but not contagious, to just hold their hand, and to do that in shifts so that this person's not abandoned, and the person who's holding their hand has that role in terms of providing empathy. There's no cost to these things, but this is what can make a place feel like a home in a community. So totally agree. You have to deal with not just the facts, but the emotions as well, and to meet these emotional needs and to give people roles so they can do that. Yeah.
That's very powerful, Cameron. I'll make a quick comment on the sort of narrow issue of, how do we get our staff to understand how to utilize life stories? Because, many companies have a shadow box where maybe it will be my Eagle Scout medals, or, one of my books, or, maybe my Starbucks cup, because it reminds me I love Starbucks in the morning. But we often, they just fall flat, people to understand. So I've done a very short training where I asked the staff to imagine that a famous country Western singer is moving into memory care next week. And she's won multiple awards and toured the world, and, very outgoing personality, a wonderful musician. What do you think she might like? And let the staff brainstorm. Oh, well, maybe she wants her room painted pink. Maybe she wants to make sure her makeup's done perfectly every day. She wants her Emmy Awards and album covers on display. Maybe she wants to play the ukulele for everybody. And this idea of trying to get them to onboard this resident based on their values, their likes and dislikes. Are there some things, to your point, Vicki and Cameron, maybe we discover, despite her success, had a terrible case of stage fright. So maybe she wants to do smaller groups. So this idea of kind of getting them to practice, what we want to do if a certain kind of person moved in, or even create your own fictional kind of interesting resident to be from Honolulu, Hawaii, who is a surfer, and ask them what would that person want. Perhaps they want to be greeted every day with the word aloha.
Yeah.
I'm seeing in the chat that there's a lot of talk about young Alzheimer, or what they used to call early onset. And I guess what I want to say is everything applies. That you still treat each person with respect and knowing that they're unique and worthwhile. You still use an adult-to-adult voice tone. You ask them what they want. You ask them what's difficult. You explore where they're at in that moment, knowing that that moment is going to be different in a couple of hours, right? Because that's just how it is with that particular disease. I think everything that we're talking about applies to both populations. Yeah. And in fact, all. Yeah. I don't think we should differentiate using respect, empathy, love, if you can, Sometimes you can't love another person, and we have to accept that as well. Sometimes they're just disgusting and you don't want to be near them. And that is also a reality. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And maybe, you know, if I can't deal with Mr. Schwartz, who I just find abhorrent, then I should not be the one working with them. We need to find somebody else to work with Mr. Schwartz. Sorry, I don't know why I got on that tangent, but it just touched me.
Yeah.
Well, Vicki, I think in part because you're talking about how one of the new ideas around dementia care is that it's okay to be authentic with your feelings and be in relationship with people. You know, 20, 30 years ago, they would say, right, oh, just make something up, she'll forget later. I mean, you know, there were all these attitudes. And I think, in fact, we you know, Virginia and I never believed that. We always thought the person with dementia would, maybe you can get away with that once or twice, but if they begin to develop an emotional memory of you that you're not on their side or not authentic, the relationship deteriorates.
Right.
And I want to follow, sorry, Cameron.
No, go ahead.
Being authentic does not mean confronting. We're not talking about reality orientation here.
No.
If I say I want to go home to see my mother and my mother is long dead, being authentic would not be, I'm sorry, but your mother died 10 years ago. That may be the truth, but that is not necessarily being authentic.
Right. And
Is
if someone's
that
at
clear?
if someone's at the door of a locked unit and it's 3 o'clock and they say, I have to go home and take care of my children. You don't tell them your children are 65 and 70 years of age, but you can ask, well, tell me about your children. You know, how do you feel about them? And sometimes you can say, and did they graduate from high school? Did they go to college? And you can use this authentic validation approach to kind of like bring them to the present. And sometimes they say, oh, that's right. You know, or
you could say, what do you want to say to your children?
Yes.
And get more into the emotional side. Or what would happen if you didn't go home? Were they ever left alone?
Because it may have happened and now this is coming back again. Exactly. We also do a lot of work with what we call cognitive ramps, which are external aids. You know, we say if you can't store the information internally, you can store it externally as long as you teach a procedure so the person can get the information for themselves. So we use a lot of that with repetitive questioning. I remember a wife who was taking care of her husband early onset Alzheimer's disease. And she said, you know, I keep writing notes which say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And yesterday he went out and collected all of the neighbors' newspapers and brought them home. What am I supposed to do? And, you know, what I suggested is you're telling him what not to do and then asking him to figure out for himself what he should do. So why don't you flip it? Why don't you find some things that would be engaging that he can still do? Put up the signs, I need your help. Okay. As opposed to putting up all these stop signs, which has got to be frustrating for everybody involved. So we can also like use the capacity for new learning and the abilities that still remain to guide people, to be able to let them know that their family is coming at 5:30 this afternoon. And so it's okay for them to be in the morning activities and they're not going to miss that visit. And then they can learn when their anxiety rises about the visit to pull out a card which says they're coming at 5:30. Their anxiety is reduced and they take part in the activity. So we use a lot of cognitive ramps, but much of the time it's designed, once again, to alleviate the emotion, the worry that they'll miss something or whatever. You have to deal with that whole person. And The person with dementia is a normal person with some cognitive disabilities. But if we acknowledge the normal person there, what's really strange is if you treat someone like they're normal, they act like they're normal. And who would have thought, right? Who would have thought? Yeah.
And is anyone really normal? David, after you make that comment, I've got another question for you.
Real quick comment, in the best friends philosophy, one thing I've written a lot about with Virginia was this, that kind of age-old concept of redirection. Someone's at the door, they want to leave. And of course, how do we move them to a different place, literally? And of course, I think it's done so badly. It's always like, come have an ice cream, Rita. Yep. Well, if I have a friend who called me in tears and said, I'm devastated, I just got fired from my job, I wouldn't say, well, go have some ice cream. That would be ludicrous. You'd say, well, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Tell me more about that. So this idea of using life story work, connection, relationship, meaning, oh gosh, hey, before you go, I've been meaning to ask you questions about your career as a nurse. I'm in such admiration. I think I'd like to go to nursing school. Can I borrow you for 5 minutes? Why don't we have a cup of coffee and talk about this? Or, again, life story work, even if it's something silly like, I think your football team, your favorite team might be playing soon. I just want to encourage everyone on the webinar today to think about training more about redirection with more authenticity, more creativity, not just have a cookie and come this way. Because again, we aren't going to have maybe down the road after we've calmed down, a chocolate will be helpful, but not when you're upset.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Redirection is putting a Band-Aid on an open wound, and all of us talk about needing to understand the cause of the behavior and that the behavior is a communication. And so if a person is standing again at the locked door of the unit saying, I want to go home, it isn't that they're necessarily requesting transportation. What they're saying is this place doesn't feel like my home. What is a home? It's a place where you have control over your life. It's your place. You have responsibilities. People need you. You have a reason to get out of the bed in the morning. And so the long-term fix is to create a place that feels like home, because then they don't need transportation. They're already there. So it's about like listening to the underlying cause behind these statements. And, is it dealing with a trauma from the past? When I worked at Menora Park, we had residents with numbers tattooed on their arms, and you do not put that person into a standard shower. Okay, you have to, and you would see these things coming back as the dementia progressed. So you have to understand the communication, the cause, where they're at, and to meet the need that's being expressed. And there's no drug that can do that.
No drug, never. And I would just like to say just remark to the redirection point, because it is sometimes so overutilized. I think we've moved away from the therapeutic line a lot more, probably not totally yet, but the redirection point that never truly gets to the heart of what that person is trying to express. So I'd like us as caregivers, as care partners, to redirect ourselves away from distracting and opening our ears and opening our hearts to listen with empathy. That's all you have to do. And it does take some centering. It takes a couple of deep breaths. It takes being non-judgmental. And it takes, to Cameron's point, not making where they live feel like a locked unit, but feel like home. And knowing that door opens. That door opens and people can go with them wherever they choose to go, because they have a choice. They are not locked behind a door. It's security on one side, but always, so often that distraction and redirection comes up when they want to leave. And yes, the ice cream, to David's point, or something, we're just trying to find something. But I had to chime in on that, because redirect ourselves away from redirecting, and I think we'll do a great favor to everyone. Vicki?
Yeah, because you'll have to buy a lifetime supply of ice cream if you're going to go that route. So
yeah,
I wanted to tell a story of a long-term care facility that, granted, it was in a very small village, but had the most brilliant approach to this issue. They had an open door policy. There were no locked doors in this facility. And there was one woman who every morning put on her hat and her coat, and she walked out of the front door. The receptionist, who was sitting right there, waved goodbye, and she sat at the bus stop that was right outside of this home. And the bus driver pulled up, and she gets on the bus and she says, "Good morning." And he says, "Good morning." And she takes her seat, and he drives the entire route. And when they get back to the front of the nursing home, he says, "This is your stop, ma'am." And she got out and she went straight up the stairs and went to her room. And that, I think, is an ideal, because you've got the community involved, you've got staff involved, you've got everyone understanding and giving space to this woman's need, perhaps to be useful or to have agency over her own life. And I think that is something, yes, you could not do that in New York City, but I think there are ways of adapting the concept to making a home environment where people are free and have agency in their own lives.
Thank you, Vicki. Yeah,
I saw we had some questions about how to get staff buy-in. And
that's what I was just going to ask. Yes.
If there's staff
Do you want to take
shortages.
that? Yep.
I think we all can, because you have to deal with it. You know, we gather information about residents and their backgrounds and their interests. And we've talked about the need to make their personal story available. We need to do the same thing for staff. We need to be able to match staff's interest with residents' interests. I know I saw that David had a staff job description that involves best friends approaches. We do similar things with Montessori approaches, but it would be very useful if that was like part of the formal job description that's there at hiring. We work with some places where staff get to have a hand in writing their own job description. And part of that involves how they're going to take their interest and be able to apply it. You know, what we always hear is, will we be allowed to do that? And so once again, this is why it's so important to convince people who make decisions that engagement is critical, not only for good care, but for the business model. And that if you want to reduce staff turnover, you need to enable staff to be taking part in best friends approach and using Montessori techniques and using validation. It will retain your best staff. And then again, a lot of these things you can do on the fly. As I said before, you know, David has 100 things you can do in under 1 minute. Vicki talks about 5 minutes of focused attention to a person can greatly reduce their anxieties, their worries, their fears, and make everyone have a better day. And so you get an incredible return on investment with regard to the time that you expend. That just needs to be recognized by administrators and managers, and it needs to be supported. And again, having data to show that this actually then helps in terms of reducing use of psychotropic drugs, reducing staff turnover, increasing satisfaction of families. It all ties together this way. It all ties together. So you can also use like appreciative inquiry. So you talk about, well, you know, what are our resources that are available for being able to expend 5 minutes a day interacting with residents. Can we build that into the job description as a job responsibility and encourage that? So anyway, that's, and I know everyone else has some response to that, but there's no place that has enough staff. So we have to start thinking in terms of what can we do with the resources that we have.
Well, I would add to that or follow up that and say family and friends. That often if we can train them and get them engaged with their loved ones, then we have additional support for our work. And I've seen that work beautifully in many places where they have a very concerted effort to train volunteers from the community. And that can be as simple as somebody who comes in every Sunday to help wheel the wheelchair residents down to the church service, or the musician who comes in and plays on Friday evenings while everybody has a glass of wine. Those are fantastic additions. And I would like to encourage the training and nurturing of volunteers. And they come often from the family members of residents who have passed, who have been visiting over years sometimes. And they can, sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, those are great reminders to that the only ones caring are not the only ones that are in the building, that there are so many resources outside, so many students that have great opportunities to learn by coming in and hearing from older adults, their wisdom shared. So yeah, keep those in mind. And then one other I would say or suggest is the management. Please encourage them to spend some time with the residents. Yes. They're very busy with administrative duties. I would never, discount that.
You asked for 1 hour a month.
That's
to adopt a resident.
Thank you.
Exactly, yes. Cameron. In fact, many organizations who've been inspired by the best friends philosophy, they've actually assigned a staff person to be a best friend to a resident or day center participant. And again, the idea of you do friendly visiting, even just a few minutes here, a few minutes there, over time, it adds up to be tremendous. The Best Friends Adult Day Center in Lexington, Kentucky, that's like almost 40 years old now, they have, I think, something like over 100 volunteers on a regular basis who come in to be with one person, their best friend, once a week, and then participate in some group activities for a half day. And I think they've had times where they've almost had a 1-to-1 staffing ratio with their volunteers.
Right. And there are two other resources. One is among the residents themselves. So we do training on how to train residents to lead activities for other residents. Persons with dementia can learn through procedural learning. Running an activity as a procedure. So we do training along those lines. And then especially where you have continuing care retirement communities, where you may have independent and assisted living, we know places where you get literally thousands of hours a year of persons from independent and assisted living volunteering to do work in the memory care neighborhood. And not only does that give you much more chance to do one-on-one, small group, but it breaks down those barriers, that the people who say, I'm never going to go to that place, they become friends with the people in memory care. They see normalization, as we call it, when you're able to create those connections and those relationships. They invite people from memory care to lunch with them in independent living. And it really is a nice way of reducing stigma, as well as increasing volunteer hours. All of us agree volunteer hours and having a healthy volunteer program is really a key, especially these days with staffing shortages.
Right. I'd like to make,
go.
just a quick point to managers. if we can train managers in just a little bit of basic validation, the validating attitude, when Mrs. de Klerk walks into the manager's office every day at 10:30 to complain about the drip in her room, that manager will not go, oh my God, don't tell her I'm here. You know, he'll go, Mrs. de Klerk, what can I do for you today? Understanding that approach is more useful, more effective, and actually will help build a relationship and be a fun part of the day.
Yeah.
I know of one manager who every week runs a validation group and has been doing it for 30 years, because that's his time to be with the residents in a joyful way.
The best part of their day.
Yeah, can be.
Mhm.
Can
And
be.
Vicki, to your point, one of the things that inspires me the most, having been in this career for 30 plus years, is I think when you can take some of these ideas, if you have a memory care program, let's say you're part of a larger continuing care retirement community, even if you're a community day center, when you get your dementia program running beautifully, when it's a source of learning, almost like a learning laboratory, it spills over and it raises everybody's care. Of course, we know that many people, even in independent living, have mild cognitive impairment. But I can't stress enough how, to me, when the memory care program ends up being the most fun place in the building, the place where people see this engagement relationship, it spills over and positively changes culture for everybody, whatever your setting is in.
Yes.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Yep. We see it all the
100.
time. And
Yep.
I've literally heard assisted living residents say, when can we have that?
Well, I can top it off. Years ago, I worked with a company and a woman said, my mother doesn't have dementia, but I want her in the dementia unit because they have the best care there. They have the most fun. It's the best place. I want her there, not in AL or IL. A great victory for those of us on the dementia care team that day.
That's beautiful. And it's proof that the pathway to well-being was being traveled, right? They really did find joy every day. And that's really what we're all striving for, to bring those moments of joy. And I know that our time is getting a little bit short. So David, I was just going to ask you if you might add maybe one or two ways that the Best Friends approach actually rounds out or adds to the validation and Montessori methods.
So, I guess I would say is that, one kind of underlying theme that all of us have at least briefly said today is that people with dementia are in many ways just like the rest of us, the same needs, emotions, feelings. And I think friendship is universally healing for all of us. Again, that example I used about, we don't offer ice cream as a first response to someone who's gotten fired or telling us they're getting divorced. We talk with them, we empathize. So I guess this idea, what I would say is, in our books of Best Friends approach, we talk about recasting the relationship. And I think in many ways, Cameron and Vicki are saying the same thing, that we want to rethink, reapproach our connection, that if we can go in as a friend, and friends are empathetic, friends know a lot about each other, friends are encouraging, they do things, that this idea of a friendship model as kind of a philosophy that we're not just here to do tasks. When you put the person before the task, everything goes better. And to Cameron's point, it is good business. I think that when you have a good program with well-trained staff and a philosophy, have a defined philosophy of care, you're all working to the same thing, people notice the difference. And it's more likely people want to move into your memory care neighborhood or go to your day program or even have your in-home workers as well. So I guess I'd say that's sort of my idea about being a best friend. And it does very much fight loneliness and isolation, put the person before the task. And sometimes it just takes a minute or two to put the person before the task, to use that life story to make the connection. And you actually save time. That's a key message for staff. If you do it the way Cameron, Vicki, and I are talking about, you actually save time, and you won't get pinched and slapped in the shower, and you won't have the combative or challenging things. You have a much better chance of having success.
Thank you, David. We're all going to take that away. Go in as a friend. That's a beautiful motto to think about. And to add to that, if Vicki, you could give all the participants at least one thing they can take away or implement, and add that to what David just shared with us, and then follow that up with Cameron sharing. And I think that will be a beautiful way of us all closing this great session, where I can just see all the comments. People are really enjoying and loving this learning. So Vicki, what would you like people to take away and implement from validation?
Look at the meaning behind the behavior and do not be afraid of emotion. Emotions are just emotions and nobody dies of them. If somebody is angry, let them be angry. If somebody is sad, let them be sad. And if you can, share their feelings with them, because an emotion shared and listened to will lessen.
Perfect, beautiful. And for some additional training, I know that you can go to the VTI website and learn a little bit more about how to really learn some of those techniques. It's sometimes easier said than done, takes a little practice. So I recommend, again, read David's books, reach out, look at Cameron's abundant resources, Vicki and the VTI website for lots of information. All three have incredible resources and training available to any of you. Cameron, one takeaway that you would love people to take away. So we know, be that friend, listen with empathy, be there for them, understand the meaning behind the behavior, as Vicki said. And what would you like to add for this group?
Yes, I think cognitive ramps are very powerful at promoting independence. I hear, as I mentioned before, staff say, will I be allowed to do this? I hear that all the time from residents. Will I be allowed to make a choice? So even something as simple as please go outside to enjoy the garden, or a sign at the hydration station, which says, please help yourself to water. As soon as I saw that sign put on, a woman in a walker came up and said, well, it's about time, poured herself some, looked around anybody else, and they began to have that thing drained twice a day, and their UTIs dropped 50% in the memory care unit. So being able to give people independence in our behaviors, but also in our environmental cues is another thing that we like to emphasize.
Such great reminders from three amazing pioneers in the field who continue to teach us and train us in thinking differently, moving away from that redirection model, moving away from the fibs, taking the time to listen, being more inclusive, empowering the staff, which makes the residents become more empowered. And I love that example just now of the sign above the hydration station. How brilliant. Help yourself. Because it's true, some people will just wait. We kind of teach them to become dependent. So those reminders in those lovely ways will empower you to empower your residents. They'll take over the neighborhood and you'll have even more fun. So this has just been a most enriching time. I'm going to turn it back over to Charles, who's afforded us this great opportunity to take us to the next steps. And thank you, David, Vicki, and Cameron, from the heart and from everyone here today.
A pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Rita, thank you very much for orchestrating such an amazing conversation. As a quote-unquote dementia nerd, I had goosebumps several times during this conversation. One, because I learned so much, so thank you very much for that. The second reason, which I think is really cool, is that the three of you, Cameron, Vicki, and David, have shown us that dementia is a problem big enough for us all and beyond, and that the best way for us to work together is actually to work together and to collaborate. So it was so cool and neat to see the three of you piggyback in terms of conversation. And the third one is that conversation is the future, right? Vicki, to your point, which was resonated from Cameron and David, the way we think and act and work and collaborate with people living with dementia has a profound effect on everyone, actually. And there's a great guide to think about that. So I always say that memory care is the future of senior living. I think there's a lot to be said also about what we do in memory care can be the future for how we treat each other as human beings. So thank you for that. And I'd like